Hey everyone, my name is Mehul and welcome to this video in which we'll be taking a look at GitHub CLI, which was launched very recently, and how you can use it to boost your productivity as a developer. Now, GitHub CLI is an add-on to Git. That means it's built on top of Git. What Git can do, GitHub CLI can do even more. And it tightly integrates with GitHub as well. So if you're somebody who uses GitHub for your work, this is a perfect video and a tool for you. So first things first, we have to install GitHub CLI. Now you can directly see that if you're running a Mac and you have Brew installed, what you can do is go ahead and run this particular command in your terminal, copy and paste, and as simple as that. Brew install GH is gonna set up the GitHub CLI for your Mac. If you're on Linux, what you have to do is go to this link, which I'll paste in the description for Linux, and you have to follow the appropriate instructions for your distribution. If it's Debian or Ubuntu, you have to follow this particular block. If you're running any of the CentOS or Fedora in distribution, then you can run the relevant instructions. Finally, if you're running Windows, you can go to the Releases tab in the CLI. Again, this link is in the description if you want to check it out. And once you go to the Releases tab, go down and you're gonna see an MSI release right here. Now, if you use a package manager for Windows like Chocolatey, then you can go ahead and directly install it just like we did with the Mac OS. But if not, then you can download an executable installer from this particular link. I'm not linking it directly because this might change if there are future releases. So go to this link and download it manually yourself. Once you have downloaded it, like I have already set this up. So once you do that, you're going to see that now GH as a tool is available for you to use. All right, so first things first, what you have to do is authenticate your GH CLI tool, that is the GitHub CLI tool, with GitHub itself so that you can actually work on the things. So how do you do that is by writing GH auth login. Once you do that, it's going to ask you which customer are you, and we are all github.com users. And how would you like to authenticate? It is going to be with a web browser. So it gives you a code. Just go ahead and copy this code and hit enter. And this is the browser. So just go ahead and enter your code and click on continue. Once you do that, it's going to ask you certain permissions. It says me existing access because I have already authorized GitHub CLI before, but for you, it might be a new access, and just go ahead and authorize it, right? Once you do that, you're all set to get started. Now, the next thing is just press on enter. And the default Git protocol, it's going to ask you. Personally, I go with SSH, but if you do not have SSH set up in your GitHub account settings, then you might want to go with HTTPS, right? Because you need SSH keys. I'm not sure if GitHub CLI sets that up for you, but definitely go ahead and use SSH if you can. So we're going to use SSH at the moment. You can also use HTTPS if that's your cup of tea. And now let's move on to the configuration, a little bit of configuration, although we have already configured one part of configuration. The next thing is we want to set up our default text editor. Now I'm going to go ahead and set up this as VS Code. If you're on Mac OS and Linux, you can follow the same command. Windows guys, right now GitHub CLI only supports Notepad as the default text editor, so this command will not really work for you. Mac OS and Linux, just go ahead and write ghconfig set editor and write code --wait like this. Now, why the --wait thing? This thing is because when you're making commits, for example, then you do not really want the VS Code instance to just exit the CLI because it might break your commit messages when GitHub is about to just get that commit message and push it to the branch as well. So --wait flags actually waits for the VS Code instance for you to close all the files in the VS Code instance before it closes down, before it moves on to the next thing. So if I do something like, if I have this thing, let's just go ahead and set this first. And if I do something like code --wait and echo 10, then I'm not gonna see this 10 on the screen unless the VS Code which has opened has all files closed, right? So that's what happens with code wait. Next thing with GH, that is the GitHub CLI tool, you can set and get configuration. So if you want to get the editor, this is our editor. If you want to get our protocol, which you just said, you can use git_protocol to get that. And if you want to change it, so for example, if I want to change the protocol to SSH, I'm going to go ahead and do something like this, right? Now if I go ahead and get the protocol, you can see we have SSH as our default protocol. Alright, the fun part starts now when you can actually create repositories on GitHub without leaving your terminal, which is so cool, right? So let's just go ahead and do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write gh repo create, and then I'm going to give the name of this repository. Let's say I want to give test123 with gh, right? And if I go ahead and hit enter, you're going to see I'm quickly moved on to an interactive terminal view. So it first of all asks me for public, private, internal. I'm going to go with public, and this would create this repository in your current directory. This is fine. Just hit a yes, and it's going to take care of pushing the particular thing on GitHub as well as locally. So it's asked me if I want to create a local directory. Sure, let's just go ahead. And you can see right here we have our test1234 repository. And if we take a look at the remote which has been added, which is the SSH remote, right? You can see because we configured SSH as our protocol, and it is correctly configured to test1234 as well. If you go to the browser, what we're going to see is that if I go to github.com, mehul and this particular repository, and you're going to see that we actually have a repository waiting for us to be initialized. So this is pretty cool. You can actually now create repositories directly from your terminal. Now this actually created repository in my personal account, but if you want to create a repository in an organization, what you can do is just to GitHub create, GitHub repo create, and then write your organization first. In this case, let's go with codedam, and then the repository. So test1234 gh, right? Again, public, yes, and just wait for it to create it on the GitHub, and you can, if you want, you can create that locally as well. So now if I go to codedam mehul which is one of my organizations, you can see we also have this repository on codedam. And similarly, you're going to see that test1234gh also has a git remote of SSH, which is fine, right? So once we are back, let's move on to cloning a repository, which is particularly interesting. So let's just go ahead and remove these folders right here, and let's just go ahead and clone a particular repository. So how do we do that? We do that by saying gh repo clone, and then you have to pass in the organization and then / the repo name. So in this case, if I want to clone express.js, so I'm going to write express.js and then express, because express.js is the organization and express is the package. So if I go ahead and browse this like this, you're going to see this is actually the express repo, and we do not really write the whole URL because that's useless. We just write the organization / the package name. And once you hit that, it's basically the git clone command with the full URL, but it's much compact and it knows where to look for because it's a tool made by GitHub. Now we can go ahead and see express, but one thing you're going to see is that, you know, it still has that particular express URL, which is something you cannot really push or pull to. So what do? In this case, what you can do is just go ahead, and given that you are in a repository which is not owned by you, what you can do is just write git repo, not really git, gh repo fork, and then hit enter. What it's gonna do is it's gonna fork this repository under your account, which is super cool. Then it also asks that would you like to add a remote for this fork? And if you go ahead and hit enter, yes. So it says that it has renamed the origin to upstream and added the remote origin. So what it has literally done is that it has created an upstream, which is the original repository for the express.js URL, and it forked the repository under your own account and changed the origin to that. Pretty sweet, right? Otherwise you have to do all this work manually. And if I go ahead under my account, I'm going to see that I have express as the fork available from express.js. Very cool. You can also fork the repository without actually cloning it first. So for that, you just have to do gh fork, and then you have to specify what you need to fork. In this case, I'm going to, gh repo fork. I'm going to try to fork the same repository again. So it's asked me that the repository already exists, so I do not want to clone it. You can try with some other repo if you want, maybe like CLI, which is the actual repository for the GH tool. So, yep, okay, we can clone it if you want. And you're going to see that it actually works just like that, that it forks it on your username. So if I go ahead and visit this particular CLI right here, this fork is available without actually cloning it first. So there's that. I'm going to just remove it because I have no use for these two code bases, but you should understand how to fork the GitHub repositories. Alright, so the next thing is creating and manipulating GitHub gists. Now, gist is basically, if you do not know what it is, it's a text hosting service sort of from GitHub. So you can go to gist.github.com and you're going to be presented with something like this. You can click on this plus to create a new gist, which is the web front, right? But we are more interested into how we do that with the help of command line because it is cool, right? So let's just go ahead and touch a bunch of files here. So I'm going to say this is index.js, and let's just go ahead and just write a very simple program. App is equal to require express, and it should not be really functional as well. I just want to have some content inside the file, right? Nothing more. So if we cat this file, you're going to see we have a bunch of things. Now let's say if I want to create a gist of this particular file, what I'm going to say is just gist create and then the name of the file. So in our case, it would be index.js. And by default, when you create this, you're going to observe that the gist URL which you get is actually private, right? This means nobody can really, it is not basically visible on your profile page, right? So nobody can just really go to your profile and get this particular thing. However, you can go ahead and create a public gist as well if you want. So you can go ahead and say gist create index.js, but you have to specify the public flag. Once you do that, it's going to create a public gist for you. And how do you differentiate between private and public gist? You can see the secret right here, right? So you see the secret, which is available on private gist. That means this is not listed on your profile, but this would be listed on your profile, right? Because it has got no secret. Alright, so we saw how you can create gists with files, but what if you want to create a gist just on the go, right? You have something in your mind and you just want to push it out. So to do that, what you can do is just write gist create and hit a dash. Now this dash just means that you want to read from the standard input. Now if you hit enter, it's gonna wait for you to enter some text. So I can say this is a pretty dope feature, right? And I can just hit enter, but you're going to observe that it does not stop. So how do you make it stop? Well, you press Ctrl and T to release the control to mark the end of the file. And once you do that, it's going to create that particular gist. It's going to give you another URL. And you can see that we have our text and all our enter keys right here, right? So again, you can see this is a secret gist and it has a random name as well. So if you do not specify a name or a file like that, it's going to end up with something like this. Finally, you can create a gist from multiple files as well. So if you see, we have two identical files, index.js and script.js. Script.js. You can see there's no difference in file, but it does not really matter. So what we can do is just say gist create, and then we can specify each file separated by spaces, index.js, then secret.js, script.js, not secret.js, and you can see it creates a gist with multiple files, and there we have it. And you can see that now we have two files in this gist, which is pretty good as well. So you can create multiple file-based gist just from your command line now. Apart from this, you can also edit your gist. So for example, if I want to edit this particular gist, what I'm going to do is say gist edit, and then I'm going to paste this ID. Now you can go ahead and paste this whole URL as well. It will just work fine. So if I go ahead and do that, and it asks me that which file do I want to edit, I'm going to go with, let's say, index.js, and you can see that it opens in VS Code, which is our default text editor, right? So if I zoom in a little, if I do a 1338, you can see that the terminal is actually waiting for us to complete our edits. Hit save and close this file. And once I do that, you can see that it asks me what's next. So it registers that the file has been closed, and then it waits for the next operation. So maybe I want to just submit it, and that's it. And once we do that and go ahead and visit this, we're going to see that we have our port changed from 1337 to 1338, which is again pretty cool given that everything was inside the interface itself. If you're a geek and if you want to just not leave your terminal at all, you can set your editor to Nano or Vim, and yeah, then you'll be in terminal all the time. So there's that. Then you can also go ahead and just list public, which is going to list all your public gists, right? Then you can also go ahead and just list secret, right? So which is going to list all your secrets for that particular matter. But I'm not going to do that because obviously I do not want you guys to visit my secret gist. All right, let's come to issues now, which you can manipulate and work with the GH tool. So first things first, I'm going to create a new repository here. So I'm going to say GH repo create test repo, right? And it's going to be a public. It's fine. We can just start with the test repo right here. And we're gonna, I want a local repository. So here's our test repo, right? It has been created on the GitHub server. So let's just go ahead and just install Express, for example, so that we have a bunch of files with us. And we can also go ahead and let's say add a git ignore right here for node modules. So let's just add these changes and add a commit message and just push this on the master, right? So once we do that, we have our sync changes synced on both local and master. So the next thing is I want to create an issue. So let's just go ahead and actually open this repository first of all. So this is a test repo, right? Let's just go ahead and open this github.com mehul and test repo. So once we do that, we're going to actually see that we have a regular repository with us with no issues at the moment. Now what we're going to do is we're going to say gh issue create, and that's as simple as that. Once you hit that, it's going to ask you for titles and body of the issue. So I'm going to say my first issue, and the body is going to be I'm going to press enter to skip it right now. You can press E to actually go ahead and open VS Code, which is going to take you through the body thing. And to be honest, VS Code might not be the best choice in a terminal because you'll be constantly switching windows when you are using something like this. But again, if you're using an integrated terminal like which is present in VS Code, then it's fine. Then the next thing is I just want to submit it. That's it. And you can see that we have our first issue available just like that, right? So it's pretty cool. You can provide the body if you want. You can actually provide these things right here as well. So you can say my second issue, and your body could be something that goes here, right? And if you do something like this, it's not going to ask you anything, and you would have your second issue with the relevant body. Pretty cool stuff again. You can also specify some labels, so I can go ahead and use the same command. Just go ahead and make use of this as the third issue, and then what we're going to say is say label, and then we can label this thing as bug maybe, or maybe if I want to have a bug and a feature together. So, and you can see that we do not have a feature label available with us, so maybe not really a feature label without that as well. So let's see the default labels. So we have an invalid label, so let's just go with that. No problem. Invalid. So actually this would validate the labels against the present labels, right? It will not create the label again, so you must have that particular label already defined. So if we go to issues, on the third issue, you can clearly see that we have issues available with the label as well, which is again a pretty cool feature. Then you can finally list the issues as well. So I can say GitHub issue list. Once I do that, it's going to list the relevant issues. Not really the relevant, but it's going to list all the issues, right? Then you can list the issues with the help of author, right? For example, if I am Mehul MPT in this case, list, not really issue, list like this. You can see I am, well, you're going to see all the issues again, but this is because I'm the only author, but you can actually customize the author handles here. So if I do Mehul MPT2, that means, somebody else, but we see nothing because there's no user who has opened the Mehul MPT2 issues. Finally, you can go ahead and label, list the issues by label as well. So I can say bug right here, and it's going to give us just a single issue which has the bug as the label for that particular issue. So now, once we go ahead and do GitHub issue list, what you're going to see is a bunch of issues. Let's say if I want to close the first issue right now. So it's as simple as saying gh issue, then close, then the number of that particular issue. So 1 in our case, that's it, and it's going to be closed. So if I go ahead now, go back to issues, go to the first issue, you can see that its issue is now closed. So you can close issues pretty smoothly by just listing them and then closing them with their number. I think it works with URL, complete URL as well if you specify. But for the most part, number would be a good way. So if I go ahead and do GitHub issue close and then the GitHub URL, it's still gonna work just like you can see. And yeah, but most likely you're gonna be using number. Finally, if you're working in a repository with a lot of people, which is going to be the case for the most part, what you can do is say GitHub issue status, right? So this command right here is gonna list relevant issues just to you. You can see that some issues assigned to you, some issues mentioning you, and issues opened by you. The difference between this and the GitHub issue list command is that list would list everything, but this GitHub issue status command is going to issue just the relevant issues which involve you as a person. Alright, so the next thing is the pull request. Now this is something where GitHub tool would really shine. So let's just go ahead and check out to a branch named dev, and let's just go ahead and open a robots.txt file in which I just add random text, right? But we have a difference now. So what I can do is I can just add this and push it to not really master, but to dev this time. And yeah, we messed it up. So origin dev, there we go. And once we do that, we're going to realize that now you can send a pull request from dev to master directly from your terminal. How do you do that? Is by saying gh create, which means that you should be on the branch from which you want to create the PR. And then you have a bunch of options to assign, right? So first thing first, let me just go ahead and hit enter to this. The title of the PR is made some changes. Hit enter. The body, again, E to launch code, but I'm just going to skip it. And yeah, just go ahead and submit it. So once you do that, you're going to see that it actually opens a pull request. So if I go to pull request, you're going to see that we have a made some changes PR, which is going to be consisting of the actual pull request, right? Now let me go back to the master branch. And what I'm going to do is actually delete the dev branch so that, let's see, if I force delete this dev branch so that we can now simulate somebody who has not accessed the dev branch before. So what I'm going to do in order to try this PR is I'm going to say GitHub PR checkout, and then I'm going to say dev branch, right? So this is the PR which the other person has said, and we have switched to a dev branch, and you can see that we have a robots.txt file available to us right now, which means it has already automatically synchronized with the remote server. So you can go ahead and just test it out. And then once you are done, you can finally say GitHub PR close, and you're going to specify the pull request number. In this case, it's 4 for us. So I'm going to say 4. You can also go ahead and say a -t. That means it would just delete the local branch, that is the dev branch, and the branch which is present on the remote. So once I do that, it's probably not gonna work. You can see it deleted the local branch and it shifted to master, but in this case we did not really merge the changes, so the changes and the PR would be lost, right? So you can see that we have deleted this particular branch, and that is visible on the GitHub as well. Let's go ahead and restore this branch for now, and let's just go ahead and take a look at the diff. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and say GitHub PR diff and number 4, because that was our branch. So this is the difference between our branch and the current master branch and the dev branch, which is basically responsible for this pull request. So there we have it. Then finally, what you can do is you can also comment on the PR request directly, which is again pretty cool. So you can say GitHub PR review, and you can say a -c, that means comment. You want to add a body directly if you want, otherwise you have to open a VS Code. So you can specify the body like this, or maybe just a B, and then you can say nice work, right? And then hit enter. And again, I think I missed something. There should be PR review, not just review. And of course you want to check out to the PR branch first of all, because master is not the branch, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and add a comment. So we can see it still does not work because our PR request is closed. So let's just go ahead and reopen the request by saying GitHub PR reopen, and with the PR request, it's going to reopen our branch That means it's going to reopen our pull request, and then we can go ahead and write the review again. Nice work. And this is going to add our comment, hopefully just like that, right? Again, pretty cool stuff with GitHub and only GitHub. Finally, you can also say GitHub PR status to actually get relevant pull requests, right? Which is again similar to what we had in issue, but for pull requests. So yeah, this is pretty much it for the crash course on GitHub new CLI tool. What do you think about this? Did you like this tool? Are you gonna use it, or have you been using it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you then in the next one.